Going through the end of August, and it is all about leading and leadership. The primary goal of this course for the quarter is personal discernment of God's assessment of you and of your own assessment of yourself. And this is particularly important as we prepare for leadership ourselves in the Christian faith. Some of you are leaders already, some of you want to be leaders, and some of you have chosen to be outstanding followers. The series began last week with the call to lead, and of course the call comes from God for those he chooses. And there goes the pastor. Today's lesson focuses on the preparation that God provides through personal encounters with him. Self-assessment, especially the sin within, is an essential part of the introspection in preparing for leadership, particularly as in leadership where people look to you, they follow you, and sometimes they really enjoy looking at that glass fishbowl that you're sitting in. So rather than focusing just on sin itself, I have chosen to back up a little bit and talk about self-assessment overall, particularly when it comes to my two guests this morning in terms of their walk, their life, and their future project. The course continues next week, a third week, to cover godly character, and that is also an essential feature of success. And our spiritual qualifications are based on God's assessment of our heart, and is the theme of next week's Sunday school lesson. And I just wanted to say all that to give you an idea of the thread with which the next quarter is following in terms of the aspects of leadership. A couple of weeks ago when I was preparing for this lesson, I had an idea that I would interview my friend Anita and her husband Gary. They have a situation in their life that I thought if I interviewed, I could share with you and help give you a first-hand, second-hand explanation of what it is to be leaders. Well, then they volunteered to come and do it themselves, so I just said yes. I just thought it would be perfectly wonderful if they did. Now, Anita Callahan has a doctoral degree in industrial engineering with an emphasis in organizational behavior. And Gary Mitchell has a doctoral degree in philosophy with a focus on organizational leadership. And a bit of personal information. I was blessed enough to be privy to their growing relationship. They met each other a year ago this past May. And that was their first date. And it was a true blessing for me to be able to see their relationship grow, because the two of them, in my opinion, followed the Lord right to the altar. And they were married this past January 1st, 2024. Before we get started, I would like to offer a prayer for our class this morning, if you'll pray with me. Father, we always are joyous in your presence. We know that you're here. You're always here looking out for us, helping us understand the path we need to follow, the chores and tasks that you have for us. So please, Father, help us keep open hearts and minds to see and hear and understand what it is that you would have us do. We pray this in Jesus' name. Now, I prepared a list of questions on their new project, and they are going to handle responding to the questions that I have given them. So you may not see the question change, you may see the topic change, and you are free to ask them questions if you would like. Anita, Gary?
Okay, I think you can hear me. Some of you know me. I can only speak in a whisper. So if you need the mic turned up, just let me know.
lifelong learners.
Yeah. If you don't understand, just ask us to repeat, and you'll repeat for me. We talked about what courses we might take now that we're old enough to get them free if we go to the community college. And we've discovered that we had some common interests. Talked about various Bible courses, various languages, not knowing that a month ago the two of us would enroll in seminary. And I will leave that for Gary to follow up on that.
And I'm going to jump way back because I know the lesson is about leadership. I never was looking for leadership in my life. As a teenager, I did feel there was a call upon my life. I'm a PK. I grew up in a pastor's home, so, you know, I experienced what it was like in the life of the church because clearly I did not want to be a pastor. I lived the life that my dad lived. I saw the things that it takes to be a pastor, and that was not going to be me. We had, though, many conversations about, well, if there's a call in your life, what do you think that may be? And I was led toward missions. This is back in the 60s, and so churches were changing, the mission field was changing, business was becoming much more of a prominent aspect. It's come a long way now. They have the position of the executive pastor and such. But back in 60 years ago, that was not the way it was. And so I knew I had a call in my life. So I looked at going to the mission field as a businessman, meaning helping set up Bible schools, helping those type of things. I attended Bible college and I attended business school, not, you know, with the desire to become a preacher, but a desire to be available toward or to what the Lord had. Now, you're going to hear two words in what I talk about. Everything is based on these two words, availability and opportunity. And so I wanted to be available. Well, the opportunity didn't present itself at that time. The opportunity was to become a police officer. And so I ended up going into police work. Well, that naturally has some leadership aspects to it. So during my career, I was fast-tracked, meaning I was promoted very quickly in my career, and so I ended up in a leadership role, which is unusual because I never finished my degree until I was in my 40s, and that's when I finally finished my bachelor's degree. So there's always been a call on my life, and it was focused on what the Lord provided as opportunities. So as we continued during that time, I ended up leaving police work after retirement. I was the assistant police chief. Didn't have anything to do. I'm retired. I become a volunteer at a church. Opportunity again. I was available. Opportunity presented itself, and I ended up on staff at the church. Then 9/11 happened. Well, if you've ever been involved in police work, it's one of those things that gets in your blood. Anita will tell you about that. So I went back into law enforcement and ended up working for the federal government, handling some accreditation of government. The government spends billions of dollars on training, and they want to know how their money is being spent. So I ended up involved in that. Well, when I got into the government, everybody at my level was either an attorney or a PhD. That's all there was. And here I am with just an MBA. So, I had an attorney working for me. And so I talked to Steve, and I said, Steve, I'm going back to get my law degree because that was my desire from many years ago. And he says, nah, don't do that. Go get your PhD. So, again, availability and opportunity. So, I went and got my PhD. I didn't get it until I was in my late 50s. But again, it was availability and opportunity. Again, I retired. This time, got to do something. Start volunteering at a church again. End up on the paid staff. The church has a school, so they have to have an administrator. It's a school that has over 200 students, so it's there. So involved in accreditation. So my life has been built on availability and opportunity. When Anita and I got married and we had the conversation that she's talking about, I'd already been studying for years because we are lifelong learners. But we continued our conversation and we found Kairos. It's a university. And so we studied what they had available and it fit what we are or at our point in our life. So everything is based on we're making ourselves available to the Lord, and He is providing us opportunities to learn.
My story is a little different. I trained as an engineer. That was what I wanted to be. Although if you read my yearbook, it says I'll either be an engineer or a chaplain. I continued as an engineer, went back and got my doctorate. I also am late as a doctorate, but not as late. I completed my doctorate when I was 35, and I went to work at the University of South Florida. I taught there for 15 years. I had students all around the world, even students in a submarine. We would shoot my lesson up to a satellite. They would shoot it back down. His response would go up, come back down to me. I felt that that was where God wanted me because I saw myself as maybe the only Jesus some of these students would ever see. It was 15 years. Then I lost my voice. No one knows where my voice is today, but this is the best I can do. For 20 years, I was depressed. What could I do? The church basically said, we don't have a place for you. And I couldn't worship. I can't sing. I began to learn sign language. I use it on a regular basis. But there were people who were offended by me using sign language. They thought it was distracting and offensive. You want to go home and cry about that? I did. Then I moved to the Estates. First question, can I join the chorus as a signing member? Okay, so I signed with the chorus. I'm sorry, I can't do any better. I cannot speak above the.
I can repeat. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I will repeat.
Okay. After joining the chorus,
After joining the chorus,
people asked if I would teach
people asked if I would teach sign language.
I said no.
She said no.
I am basically a toddler in sign language.
Anita was a toddler in sign language.
But they kept asking.
But they kept asking.
So, Silent Singers was born.
So Silent Singers was born.
Some of you have seen us here. A group of 10 people learning sign language.
Some of you have seen us here, a group of 10 people learning sign language.
Today, I worship at a church that allows me to use sign language.
Today, I worship at a church that allows me to use sign language.
I teach sign language. And with this opportunity at Kairos,
And with this opportunity at Kairos,
I have a chance to make it so other people don't experience what I did.
I have a chance to make it so other people don't experience what I went through.
There are many cases where the disabled
There are many cases where the disabled
cannot
cannot
join in
join
worship.
in worship.
That is the direction that God is leading me and has been leading me all my life.
That is the direction that God is leading me, and that's been the direction of all my life.
One of the questions Robin asked was, how do you evaluate your strengths, your gifts, to be used by God?
One of the questions that Robin asked was how you evaluate your strengths and gifts for God to use.
We've taken tests upon tests through our lives.
We've taken test upon test through our lives.
And just did 2 more. No surprises.
And just in the most recent one, no surprises.
But it showed a direction where God could use us.
But it showed a direction where God could use us.
My strength
My strength
is in encouraging and advocating for other people.
My strength is in encouraging and advocating for others.
Gary's strength is in planning and putting things into action.
Gary's strength is planning and putting things into action. And I'm going to step in right here and tell you a quick little story. I was always involved in the planning aspect of the organization. The police department is what I'm talking about. I ran a couple units. I ran the planning and research. We had the policy analysis and unit where we created substantial plans on how we would respond for all sorts of situations. So I do have a planning background. When Anita told you about John, my wife Peg and I were married for 30 years. And early into our marriage, we took a trip to New York City. And the trip, you know, I made plans for the trip. I knew where we would be at certain times in the day. I knew that I wanted to get an all-day subway card because I could, you know, get the best buck for, you know, for my money. So we're going on the trip, and we end up getting to go up into the Statue of Liberty Head, which we weren't expecting to do, but it just worked out. But as we're coming back from the Statue of Liberty, you stop at Ellis Island. Well, I knew I didn't have any relatives that went there. And it was one of those, if we stopped, then we'd have to spend, you know, a couple hours, which would have then created a problem meeting our next stop. So we didn't go to Ellis Island. We continued on, and that was that where my wife, Peg, said, I finally realized you're planning how it fits into your life at such a high level. But the funny part is, when I got back, my mother says, well, why did you get off at Ellis Island? Your grandmother came through there. And I said, you never told me my grandmother came through Ellis Island. We would have gotten off. So that's our story. But planning is, and Anita will tell you, I'm very spatial as well. You know, I can look at things and have a very spatial orientation. So planning is much a part of life. Now these assessments, like she said, didn't really tell us anything new. They just put new names with them. They call me an achiever and an arranger. So those are just new terms
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
for what we do. So I'm going to turn it back to Anita again to tell us a little more about the course.
We are, yes, we're 70 years old. And many people say,
Tell me that.
oh, sorry, dear. Many people say, why are you doing something like this at this stage in your life? We're retired. We're not looking to go back to work. We're trying to follow, though, what God is saying do. What this leads to is a program that will allow us to stay in Lakeland and put the strengths, the gifts, and the talents that God has given us into practice. Once again, it's the availability and the opportunity to serve God. Me, I'm an engineer. Yes, I've known from the time I was born that God had a call. In fact, God stepped in to prevent me from being thrown away in a bucket. My mom wanted to be pregnant. No success. She and Dad tried for 4 years. No child. Finally, the doctor said, one chance. We'll do surgery. And sometimes women get pregnant after surgery. Mom says, okay, yes. So, a date has been scheduled. Mom is ready for surgery and gets a phone call from her brother. Her brother is in Japan. He's coming home back to California. Can he stop and visit my parents on his way to his next assignment? Sure. Only problem, same time as Mom's surgery. Mom calls. Okay, we'll postpone it a month. When my uncle showed up, that was the day my mom learned that she was pregnant. If my uncle had not come, I would literally have been thrown away when they did surgery. From the beginning, I have known God had a purpose for my life. That purpose changed. I taught engineering. Then there was the valley. Now I work in sign language. I work with the disabled. I am a co-worship leader at the estates. I have visited other churches as a co-worship leader. And today, I am a student in seminary.
Anita talks about the hand of God being in her life in that special way. I'm kind of just a regular guy. You know, I grew up as just the kid down the street, you know, a regular guy. Got her job, went to high school, just You would lose me in the crowd. But what I did do was make myself available. And I've used that, again, available and an opportunity. And I look at so many of the men of the Bible. I'm thinking of Gideon, Joshua, Moses. They made themselves available, and God found an opportunity for them. And as they fulfilled what he had in that opportunity, then there was a great change in their country and their land. And that's all he's really asking of any one of us, is to make ourselves available, and then he will create the opportunities. We don't have to create them. I didn't create any of this stuff. In fact, another little story, how I became a police officer. I never intended to become a police officer. But I was a young man with several children. The economy was not good for the field that I was in. And so the opportunity presented that they were looking for police officers and firefighters in St. Petersburg. So I went to the place where you pick up an application, and I said, give me a police officer and firefighter application. They said they can't do that. We can only give you one. So my simple question was, which one pays the most? She said, police officer. So I said, give me a police officer application, and filled it out, and the rest is history. Because I was available at that moment, the opportunity presented itself. Now, in the several questions, and one of the questions is, Robin asked us, well, what are you going to do when this is all over? What are you going to do when you get your degree? Well, I wrote about it actually when I worked on my last dissertation. If you know what dissertations, they always give you a chance to dedicate it, just like a book, to somebody, or to write about your experience or something like that. And this is what I wrote. There's other, but this is what I wrote in one paragraph. I would like to thank my Lord for placing the desire in my heart to complete this research. The Lord has placed this desire in our hearts to study continually. Because he said, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. For I knew the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you new hope and a future. And that comes from Jeremiah 1:5 and 29:11. And that's out of the New International Version. For truly it is as it is written in Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Again, New International Version. I ended the paragraph, I know he has a purpose for this work, even if I do not know the purpose, and it is still unknown to me. So, we don't know where we will be at, potentially 3 years from now, because that's how long the program lasts. So we don't know where we'll be 3 years from now. The Lord does. We are just making ourselves available. And it may be in some form of leadership. It may be just being available again. And that's the key to leadership, is making yourself available to the Lord. We wanted to leave a little time for questions. And I think we've left about 9 minutes according to my watch. So, now, I used to run a program where you couldn't leave until you asked a question. And in fact, we have a little ritual at our house that we don't leave the dinner table until we have an opportunity to ask a question. And if you won't ask a question, I'll ask Anita to ask a question.
Before we do that, I want to share another verse from
before we do that, Anita would like to share another verse from the Bible.
Go back to the Old Testament
Go back to the Old Testament
and the book of Esther.
in the book of Esther.
Who knows? But you have attained royalty
Who knows, but you have attained royalty
for such a time as this.
for such a time as this.
Availability is the only answer I can give you as far as why we are where we are today.
Availability is the only answer I can give you for why we are at the position we are today.
Any questions?
Make them hard.
I'd like to offer another verse that's become my favorite. It's in Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8, when the Lord asks, "Whom shall we send?" And Isaiah says, "Send me," basically. I think I left something out, but that's the point. And that's always been a favorite verse of mine. Can you think of others? No, we're at a blank. Okay.
Well, just to, and we call them a test, but they aren't, they're assessments. The assessment, the most recent assessment we took was
Finding your strength.
Finding Your Strength by Clifton Gordon,
Something like that.
something like that. But there are 34 possible attributes, but they look at the top 5 of your attributes. And mine was achiever, arranger, responsibility, belief, and learner. Anita's were believer,
Believer.
intellection.
That was the last one.
Okay.
Responsibility.
Responsibility, learner,
Intellection. That means I think.
intellection.
And I don't remember.
What was unique was we matched on 3 of them in our top 5. Now, they give you this scoring principle that they have, that they say you're 1 out of 275,000 people, and we're unique. So we found it very odd that we would be so close in so many of the 5. We matched on 3 of them: responsibility, belief, and learning. So, again, this is an opportunity, and it's an opportunity available to you. You know, if you are interested in continuing your education and your learning, it's available to anybody. Because nowadays with educational opportunities, they're all done online, Zoom, email. So if you're interested in studying the Bible, learning about your gifts, there's an opportunity for you. Still got time for questions.
Have you considered either Kairos prison ministry for you or Emmaus walk for both of you?
I'm aware of both of them. In fact, though I spent years with Prison Fellowship and involved with them going into the prison and, teaching and leading services. We haven't talked about Emmaus, but I do know the walk and what it entails, but we haven't talked about it.
So now it's on your radar.
Yep, it's on my radar again.
My name is Mick, and I attend church here, so it's on your radar. Robin knows me. And if God convicts you to go into the prison or to go on the Emmaus walk, I'll talk with you.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you, Mick.
I will be honest and tell you that up until recently, I felt that there was no place for me to serve God. I lost my voice. Some of you can't hear me. And there's nothing I can do about that. But God, in His infinite wisdom, has given me an opportunity to work so that others don't face the rejection that I faced.
Well, not only would I like to thank Anita and Gary for being here, I am also want to express my gratitude for the Lord putting them in my life, because they are good friends and I care about them greatly. And it delighted me no end that they offered to do this for me this morning and share things with you that, coming from me secondhand, would not have had the same impact had they not been here. So I thank you for being here this morning. And if there are any questions, I'm going to end the class now. It's a little early, but I think you can handle it. And if you want to come up and speak to them and ask your questions there, you are more than welcome. And thank you all.